Okay, madam, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Last week we started with cell injury, basically cell and its adaptation, and then we just stopped short of cell injury. Today I'll continue with cell injury, cell death, mechanism of cell injury, and necrosis. Okay, so once we talk about cell injury, there are two types of cell injury. One is a reversible injury, the other one is the irreversible injury. Reversible injury means it's the early stages or there is just a mild insult to that cell. In that time, the cell will somehow try to adapt with its functional or morphologic changes. And if that injurious stimulus or whatever is insulting that cell is removed, that cell will return back to normalcy. So that is your reversible cell injury. Whenever we talk about cell injury, especially in general pathology, we will talk about what are the changes which happen in the biochemical pathways and what are the molecular changes. So, how do we know about this? By ultramicroscopic structures. That means how it looks under the electron microscope. So all these cellular changes which happen in the immediate vicinity of cell injury, like if there has been a cellular insult and whatever injury happens and whatever changes happen in that cell, they are first visible only under the electron microscope. Okay, after that injury has been there for some time, whatever the cell adapts to and that it changes to, that will be, visible to you under the light microscopy. That means the microscopes under which you all have seen the slides, under which we report. So if that way, if I have to talk about reversible cell injury, what are the biochemical changes which are occurring? And these are the hallmarks of reversible cell injury. First, there's going to be reduced oxidative phosphorylation. What do you mean by oxidative phosphorylation? You must have studied in biochemistry or just remember one of your biochemistry classes that for energy generation, that means for your ATP production, this reduced oxidative phosphorylation, you're going to have decrease of ATP. That's how it's going to be stores. Okay, so that's one hallmark. And then because of that, what will happen? The cell will swell because water and ions will get inside the cell. So cellular swelling and reduction in oxidative phosphorylation are the hallmarks of reversible cell injury. Please take this sentence as something which you're going to remember, because most of your MCQs will be based on this principle. What happened, that scenario you'll have to relate to this, and then you'll have to decide whether they're talking reversible cell injury or whether they're talking irreversible cell injury. I will elaborate on this as we go ahead. In addition to this, once the cell swelling starts, then you have mitochondrial cell membrane changes are limited. Usually the plasma membrane is maintained. Okay, till then it is reversible. Now once the insult which is insulting the cell, either in the form of some ischemia, injury, toxin, chemical, whatever it may be, once that keeps on insulting the cell further and further, reaches a stage where it becomes irreversible. That is, it's a point of no return back to reversible cell injury. So later it becomes irreversible cell injury and then it is going to die. Okay, when we talk about cell death, there are two important pathways which you all must be aware of. One is called apoptosis. So these two important cell death. Necrosis means something which some insult has happened to the cell. Now no longer the cell is viable. So body will have to get rid of it to make sure that the rest of the cells are fine. It's like thing has started, the body has tried to get it back to normalcy, but since the injury is so bad that it will have to be cut off. So that is necrosis. how are you going to define it? It is an accidental and unregulated form of cell death resulting from the damage to cell membrane. So the most important difference between a reversible cell injury and an irreversible cell injury is the cell membrane defect. In reversible, the cell membrane is still intact, whereas in irreversible cell injury, especially necrosis, there is cell damage. Because of that, what happens? There is leakage of all the enzymes and the ions from inside the cell to outside the cell, which will basically start a cascade of events which will result in the death of that cell. Okay. Now, when this damage to the membrane is severe, cell membrane damage, when it becomes severe, lysosomal enzymes will enter the cytoplasm. Basically, now it is sacrifice the cell to maintain the rest of the body cells. So lysosomal enzymes, which are the policemen, they will enter the cytoplasm. They will digest all the cells. It will give rise to basically there is a inflammation, morphologic changes which will cause necrosis. And cellular contents will leak through the damaged plasma membrane into the extracellular space, and because of which the extracellular space will elicit a host inflammation so that it recruits more and more neutrophils and macrophages. They will eat away whatever cellular debris is there, and thus the necrotic cells are cleared and the body will try to come back to normal. Okay, this is on a broad way how necrosis is explained. The biochemical and the molecular pathway I will explain to you in detail in just a few minutes. Okay, so necrosis, to put it in a nutshell, is the pathway of cell death in many commonly encountered injuries. So what insult was I talking about? It could be ischemia, it could be exposure to toxins, infections, trauma, genetic, nutritional deficiency. There are so many things which can act as an insult. In contrast to necrosis, what is apoptosis? By now you all know what is apoptosis. It is programmed cell death. That's the name given to apoptosis. That's how we are going to remember that. Now this is where the cell's DNA or proteins are damaged beyond repair. The cell kills itself by apoptosis. This is a form of cell death that is characterized by nuclear dissolution, fragmentation of the cell without the complete loss of membrane integrity, and rapid removal of the cellular debris. In necrosis, what happened? The cell membrane got affected. It became leaky. Things leaked out into the extracellular space. It incited an inflammatory reaction. But in contrast to that, apoptosis will not instigate any inflammatory reaction. The cell membrane is fragmented in such a way that the cellular contents are not leaked out into the third space, and they fragment, and that is eaten away by the macrophages, and the removal of cellular debris happens, and it is clean. That's how the major difference happens between necrosis and apoptosis. Because the cellular contents do not leak out, unlike in necrosis, there is no inflammatory reaction. And apoptosis is a highly regulated process by a series of genetic pathways. The molecular mechanism and the biochemical pathway of apoptosis is something which has been studied in detail. And once you know more about it, it will be very easy for you to understand more about neoplasia and answer questions related to apoptosis, neoplasia, and genetics. This I will take it in my next class. So this is a table for you to easily, recap what is the difference between necrosis and apoptosis. In necrosis, there is going to be cell swelling, whereas in apoptosis, the cell is going to shrink. In nuclear changes in necrosis, we have something called pycnosis, karyorrhexis, karyolysis. I'll explain what it is, each of them. But in apoptosis, the nucleus is going to be fragmented into nucleosome-size fragments. Plasma membrane is disrupted in necrosis, whereas it is intact in apoptosis. Cellular contents, there's going to be enzymatic digestion, and it will leak out of the cell in necrosis, Whereas in apoptosis, it is intact and may be released in apoptotic bodies. Necrosis inflammation, as I already explained, is frequent in necrosis. It is not seen in apoptosis. Physiologic or pathologic role, necrosis is invariably pathologic because of the insult which is happening. It is a form of irreversible cell injury. Whereas apoptosis is physiologic, mainly acts as a policeman to see to it that all this DNA damage and the cells which are not needed are removed from the body without eliciting an inflammatory response. Having said that, what I've been talking about in cell injury. So what are these agents which will cause cell injury? There are a host of causes. You can remember a few, but this, if you can apply to the clinical setting, that is where you will be able to answer most of your MCQs which are presented to you with a clinical problem. Okay, so we'll start with the first one, that is oxygen deprivation. Basically, hypoxia, which is a deficiency of oxygen, definitely is going to cause injury. Why does it do that? The aerobic oxidative respiration or the aerobic cycle, what is there, will become anaerobic glycolysis. So thus it is going to cause cell injury. Now, hypoxia is an extremely important and common cause of cell injury and cell death. Causes of hypoxia include, how all can you have hypoxia? Reduced blood flow, that is the commonest. Ischemia, right? So where all do you see ischemia? Commonest examples, clinical setting. What is the ischemia of the heart called? Somebody can unmute and answer.
Myocardial infarction.
Myocardial infarction. What is the ischemia of the brain called? What happens if there is brain infarction? Clinically, what is it termed as? Clinically, what is brain infarction termed as?
Cerebral infraction.
Stroke. Okay. Stroke is basically one of the reasons why stroke happens is also cerebral ischemia, infarction, right? Then inadequate oxygenation of the blood due to cardiorespiratory failure. This we know very well in our chronic COPDs and your heart failures. So this is the cause. And decreased oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, mainly in these chronic anemias or carbon monoxide poisoning, or after a very severe blood loss. So all this will culminate in one form of hypoxia, and that will cause cell injury. Depending on the severity of the hypoxic state, the cells may adapt, undergo injury, or they will die. Now, for example, an artery is narrowed. Okay, the tissue it's supplied by that vessel may initially shrink, that is atrophy, whereas more severe or sudden hypoxia will induce injury and cell death, right? Then physical agents, which include mechanical trauma, extremes of temperature, road traffic accidents, sudden change in atmospheric pressure, radiation injury, and electric shock. Chemical agents and drugs, you have a host of chemicals which produce this, okay? So mainly chemicals such as glucose or salt in hypertonic solutions may cause cell injury directly, because why? They will derange the electrolyte balance in the cells. Even oxygen at high concentration is toxic. Then, as we know, all these poisons, trace amounts of these such as arsenic, cyanide, and mercuric salts, they will damage the cells within minutes. Some of them might take few hours, but then these are, we know that they are deadly poisons. And when I talk about glucose and salt hypertonic concentrations, basically it's your fluid and electrolyte balance in the body. You know, if you studied medicine or you are studying medicine, you know that fluid and electrolyte balance in the body is one of the most important and critical chapters which you should know, especially if you're going to work in the ICU or in the casualty, right? So this is one of the reason why cell injury occurs. You can extrapolate it when you study the electrolyte balance. Then at other potential injury substances in our day-to-day life, we know all environmental air pollutants are insecticides, herbicides, occupational hazard, carbon monoxide, asbestosis, recreational drugs such as alcohol, alcoholic liver disease is one example of it. And then there are so many others. You name it and everything is going to have some or the other toxic effect. Then one other favorite thing is infectious agents. To parasite, everything can cause which you will have to remember. Not always from outside. There are so many times that there is a autoimmune reaction which is going to develop, so that the body will recognize its own cells as foreign and it will develop antibodies against it, and that will start killing the body's own cell. So immunologic reactions have to be also kept in mind. Then genetic derangements. See, there are genetic defects which may cause cell injury because of deficiency of the functional proteins, such as the enzyme defects of inborn errors of metabolism. Then there is accumulation of damaged DNA or misfolded protein, which can trigger the cell death when they are beyond repair. And DNA sequence variants are common in human populations, which we call as polymorphism. That can also influence the susceptibility of cells to injury by chemicals and other environmental insults. Then nutrition. Imbalance in the nutrition is another major cause of cell injury. The protein calorie malnutrition. Which population we know about it. Anorexia nervosa is another cause which we can think of under nutritional imbalances. Then atherosclerosis, if I can tell, that's actually endemic because of obesity, not just in United States, now in India also, it is very, very endemic. And in addition to the problems of undernutrition and overnutrition, the composition of diet makes a significant contribution to many of these lifestyle diseases. So having known what all can cause cell injury, we will come to what are the morphologic alterations in cell injury. See, morphology means last time only I told you, whatever you can see, whatever changes or whatever you can see either to your naked eye, which is called gross description of that particular organ, whatever you see under the microscope becomes your microscopic morphologic alterations. So what will happen is there is a point, there is a injury starting at this point. Now for some time it remains reversible. Okay, so initially maybe once, let's take the example of myocardial infarction. Now for the first 4-5 minutes, it has started, maybe no symptoms have developed. So initially, it is still in the stage of reversible cell injury, but the cell function will start to come down. Then what happens? Within a little more time of another 10-15 minutes, biochemical alterations will start happening within that cell. And with those alterations, it will reach cell death, right? So, sorry. Once it reaches cell death, then you can see ultrastructural changes. So maybe the ultrastructural changes will not be visible in an infected cell of the myocardium for about 6 to 14 hours. You'll not be able to make out even under the electron microscopy if it is sudden. It's only the biochemical alterations, because cell has died, the cell membrane has become more permeable, the enzymes have leaked out, so you have a specific markers such as troponin T, troponin I, CKMB, they all have gone out of the cell, they have so you will be able to measure them and see that if they are elevated, you take it as evidence of myocardial ischemia. right? Within the first 1 to 2 hours, it will start rising. You have seen that graph as to how the cardiac markers are going to rise. So how they rise is because of this mechanism, right? So only after 6 to 8 hours, ultrastructural changes will happen. That is an electron microscope. Much later, after 12 to 24 hours, you will see light microscopic changes. That is a regular microscope under which we see. And much later, if you have to see an infarction on a heart grossly, then that is going to take even much more time. So this is the sequence of events of appearance of morphologic changes in any cell injury, right? So when we talk about reversible injury, what are the things which you're going to see? Okay, I already told you there is reduction in oxidative phosphorylation, that is mitochondrial change, and there is cellular swelling. So cellular swelling is the first manifestation. And initially, it's very difficult to appreciate, as I already told you. Initially, once you start seeing the cellular swelling, there'll be some pallor, increased turgor, and increase in the weight of that particular organ. Okay, microscopically, we will see some clear vacuoles within the cytoplasm, and they become distended and they get pinched off segments. They are basically pinched off segments of the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, this pattern of this injury, whatever happens, and you get this vacuoles, it is called as hydropic change or vacuolar degeneration. And cellular swelling is a reversible morphologic change because it is under the reversible injury. Once the insult is removed, it will go back to normal. On light microscopy, if at all we are seeing at a stage of reversible injury, then there will be increased eosinophilic staining. And if that cell doesn't recover from reversible injury, goes on to become irreversible, then it will become more of necrosis. In reversible cell injury, what are the electron microscope? Plasma membrane alterations. They will start with blebbing and blunting and loss of microvilli. But then the membrane as such remains intact, as opposed to irreversible, where the membrane is going to break open, right? This is only in electron microscope. You cannot appreciate any of these changes under the light microscope. Second thing, mitochondrial changes, which include swelling and appearance of amorphous densities within the mitochondria. And there will be dilatation of the endoplasmic reticulum with detachment of polysomes. And there is something called as intracytoplasmic myelin figures, which may be present because of the proteins which get denatured within the cell. See, this is a representation of diagrammatic representation of necrosis versus apoptosis. In necrosis, you have normal cell. Initially, reversible injury, what just we spoke about, electron microscopic picture. There is cytoplasmic blebbing, loss of microvilli, cellular swelling. Compared to this cell is swollen, right? And there is endoplasmic reticulum, which is swollen. If the insult is removed at this stage, it can go back to being a normal cell. But if the insult continues, then the cell membrane is now opened up, broken, if you can see. And then there is appearance of these myelin figures, which are nothing but denatured protein, and amorphous densities start appearing within the mitochondrial membrane, right? So at this stage, it has become necrosis. It has gone out into the peripheral third space, and it has attracted many neutrophils and macrophages, which are going to eat away all this debris. Whereas in apoptosis, what will happen? A normal cell, this will still maintain its membrane integrity. There is condensation of chromatin and appearance of membrane blebs. Then there is cellular fragmentation along with intact cell membranes. So cell will get fragmented, but then the cell membrane remains intact. These are called as apoptotic bodies. And then from this stage, the phagocytes are attracted and they will come and eat away the apoptotic bodies. So these are the diagrammatic representation of necrosis and apoptosis. What will happen under the light microscopy? This is a normal cell. Okay. What will happen if it's reversible? Cellular swelling will happen and they become a little more pale compared to the staining here. A cellular swelling in this. So nothing much, but you can see at least this here. If it goes to necrosis, you can see that all your nuclear material has all gone off and this entire protein, everything inside the cell has denatured and it has become a very pale kind of an amorphous pink material just lying there to tell you a tale that there was some cell before. So this is necrosis. Yeah, I hope you can appreciate the difference. Same thing, whatever I explained, increased eosinophilia and myelin figures. These are the two hallmarks of necrosis. Okay. And the nuclear changes, you have to remember 3 of them under necrosis. There's going to be karyolysis, pycnosis, and karyorrhexis. Karyolysis means the chromatin, no, the nucleus always looks hematoxylin, that is, it looks bluish purple. In karyolysis, that basophilia is what we call it. That purple color is called basophilic staining. So that basophilia will fade because of loss of DNA due to the enzymatic degradation by the endonucleases. Next, there's going to be pycnosis of this nucleus, that the nucleus will shrink in size and then it will, because it shrinks, it will become increasingly basophilic. That means the nucleus becomes more and more purple in color. That is called chromatin condensation into solid shrunken basophilic masses. Last is karyorrhexis. That means this pycnotic nucleus now will undergo rhexis. That is, it's going to be broken down into fragments. Later, it will be cleared up by the macrophages. Now here is where you will have to pay more attention because one of the favorite topics for MCQs, what is what kind of necrosis. Once we learn so much about necrosis, obviously there will be different morphologic types of necrosis also. So these are the ones which I have listed out: coagulative necrosis, liquefactive necrosis, gangrenous necrosis, caseous necrosis, and fat necrosis. Now let's see what is what. Coagulative necrosis. Basically, you know what is coagulation. Coagulum means something, everything comes together and it forms like a mass. All right. So here, coagulative necrosis is something wherein the architecture of the dead tissue is preserved for a span of at least some days. The affected tissue will exhibit a firm structure. Presumably, the injury denatures not only the structural proteins but also the enzymes. Therefore, it will block the proteolysis of these dead cells. And therefore, you just see that eosinophilic anucleate cells will persist for days and weeks. Ultimately, the necrotic cells are removed by the phagocytosis of the cellular debris by infiltrating leukocytes and by digestion of the dead cells by the action of lysosomal enzymes of the leukocytes. And the commonest cause of coagulative necrosis is ischemia. Ischemia, because of any reason, most commonly because of obstruction of a vessel. And this kind of necrosis, ischemia to any organ except in that of brain. Why? I will tell you. And a localized area of coagulative necrosis becomes an infarct. Okay. So if you can see in this picture, this is actually a liver. If you can see, it's very well demarcated from its surrounding. This was the area which has undergone infarction, and this is the area of coagulative necrosis. If you see under microscopy, this is like kidney. What we can see is that these are the normal tubules. They have good nucleus. Okay, this is normal. Then there is a sharp demarcation here. And this area is necrosed. You can still see that it is maintaining the architecture of the tubules here, but you cannot see any nucleus within them, right? It is a telltale sign that these cells were there. That is what it's called, row of tombstones, you know. It's a telltale sign that it was there, now it is not there, it's all dead. That is coagulative necrosis. Myocardial infarction caused because of, myocardial ischemia is another classical example where you get to see coagulative necrosis. Mainly it happens because of denaturation of the proteins within the cell, as well as that of the the enzymes which will cause proteolysis of the cell. So that's why the architecture is maintained. So that is coagulative necrosis. The prototype is ischemic infarcts. All the organs which undergo ischemia will show coagulative necrosis except brain. Okay. In brain, what happens? There is necrosis. Along with that, there is that tissue mass, whichever area was necrosed, will undergo a liquid transition into a liquid viscous mass. You know, that is called as liquefactor necrosis. Okay, so that's why I kept on saying that coagulative necrosis is the result of ischemia in all other body organs except in brain. In brain, it is liquefactor necrosis. If you can see here, this is the area which is totally liquefied. Okay, now it is seen in focal bacterial, occasionally fungal infections, because these microbes are there, no, they will stimulate the accumulation of leukocytes, and thus once leukocytes come in, there's going to be enzymes, and that is going to eat away everything, and that necrotic material will become liquid viscous mass, and it's like this creamy yellow material, looks like that of it has leukocytes in it, creamy yellow color, and that is what we call as pus, right? So that is what is liquefactive necrosis. And the hypoxic death in the brain is called liquefactive liquefactive necrosis, and we don't know why the exception is there, that it is not a coagulative but it's a liquefactive necrosis. Then we have gangrenous necrosis. See, gangrenous necrosis is not like any specific pattern of necrosis which we see under the microscope. It is basically a clinical term which is applied to usually one of the extremities, either an arm or a leg, lower leg, which has lost its blood supply, and it will undergo necrosis. It is basically a coagulative necrosis only. Okay, multiple tissue planes will undergo necrosis. When bacterial infection is superimposed, there is more liquefactive necrosis because of the action of degradative enzymes in the bacteria and the attracted leukocytes. That is called as wet gangrene. Okay, so that is the meaning of gangrenous necrosis. One more type of necrosis which is very, very favorite is the caseous necrosis. And what is the hallmark of caseous necrosis? It is tuberculosis. Okay, caseous necrosis is basically meaning it is cheese-like, and it is derived from the friable white appearance of the area wherever, and it has undergone necrosis. Okay, it will be like this white chalky kind of area, very nicely appreciated whenever you have an organ which you have received for grossing, which has been removed because of tuberculosis. Microscopically, you see a necrotic area which is structureless collection of fragmented or lysed amorphous granular debris, okay, which is there with an it is colored by an inflammatory border. See here, I'll show you in this picture. I think you can see my cursor, right? So this area in the center, or this area here, this is caseous necrosis. Okay, now this is going to be bordered by histiocytes which are modified. Okay, all these histiocytes here, they all are modified here. They are called epithelioid cells. Okay, and here is a giant cell. This is called as a what giant cell? Langerhans giant cell. Okay, this is all this put together is called as a granuloma. Okay. Once we see caseous necrosis, epithelioid cells, and this Langerhans giant cell and lymphocytes cuffing it, we call it a granuloma, and it is a very much hallmark of tuberculosis. So caseous necrosis, tuberculosis. Then there is fat necrosis. So as the name suggests, it is the necrosis of fat. So it's going to occur in organs which are rich in fat, like the pancreas or the breast. You know, this basically refers to focal areas of fat destruction, which will result from the release of activated pancreatic lipases into the substance of the pancreas and the peritoneal cavity. Now, that clinical condition which results because of fat necrosis in pancreas is called as acute pancreatitis. What will happen in this is, because there is cell injury, the cell membrane will break out, all the enzymes will go out, then they will cause liquefaction of the membranes of the fat cells in the peritoneum. Now, because of this released lipases, they are going to split the triglyceride esters, which are contained within the fat cells. So the fatty acids which are so derived are going to combine with the calcium, which is already present there. So calcium and these fatty acids will combine and they will form chalky white areas. So in this picture, if you can see, yeah, these ones, that is called fat saponification. So these white areas are hallmarks of fat necrosis. Histologically, the necrosis takes the form of these foci of shadowy outlines of necrotic fat cells, and you have calcium deposits, which is easy to identify, and there is inflammatory reaction. So that's how we will report a fat necrosis. So fat necrosis prototype you're going to remember is acute pancreatitis. Then there is one more necrosis called as fibrinoid necrosis. Now, this is basically a special form of necrosis, usually seen in the immune reaction. I told about autoimmune reactions, right? So, immune reaction mostly affecting the blood vessels, right? So, whatever kind of necrosis you see in these blood vessels here, this one is called as fibrinoid necrosis. This is a lumen of a blood vessel. You can see the RBCs here. So, this is in the wall of the blood vessel. So this typically occurs when complexes of antigen antibodies are deposited in the wall of the arteries. And these deposits of immune complex with fibrin that are leaked out of the blood vessels, that will result in this bright pink appearance on HND, and that's called fibrinoid. That means fibrin-like, fibrinoid necrosis. So fibrinoid necrosis, blood vessels, commonly autoimmune disorders. Yes, so those were the types of necrosis, how they appear morphologically, and one prototype example for each kind of necrosis. Now, I will try to touch upon a little on the biochemical and the molecular pathways of cell injury. Okay. See, cell injury, I told you how it occurs, what are the hallmarks. But under the biochemical parameter, what all goes wrong? And under the molecular pathway, what is it that triggers the next step? So that if you understand, it will be very easy to explain the later part of next topic of apoptosis. Okay, I've tried to simplify it for you as much as possible. Now, these are the steps with which there's going to be cell injury, which happens within the cell. Imagine a cell and whatever happens within the cell. First, there is going to be depletion of ATP because of reduction in oxidative phosphorylation. And then simultaneously, there's going to be mitochondrial damage. Now, because of both these, there is going to be influx of calcium and loss of calcium homeostasis. You know that calcium homeostasis is very important for the internal milieu of all the cells. So that is going to be disrupted. Now, once calcium comes into the cells, a cascade of events is set into motion, and it will result in ultimately accumulation of oxygen derived free radicals. That is what we call oxidative stress on the cell. That finally results in defects in the membrane permeability of the cell, and thus the membrane is broken and it will leak all the cellular contents into the periphery. Along with that, inside the nucleus, there's going to be damage to the DNA and to the proteins. So these are the 6 things which you will have to remember when we talk about mechanisms of cell injury. See, if we think about mitochondria, this is in a nutshell, all the steps put together. There is mitochondrial damage, because of which there is reduced ATP because of reduced oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so because of which it will trigger a lot of multiple downstream effects. And because of damage to the mitochondria, there is increase in the reactive oxygen species that is going to denature the lipids, proteins, and the DNA. Because of all this, there is entry of calcium into the cell, which will cause increased mitochondrial permeability and adaptation of multiple cellular activation of multiple cellular enzymes that will further damage the cell. And then simultaneously, all this will result in increased membrane permeability. That means the membrane damage is going to occur. Plasma membrane damage, there will be loss of cellular components, and also lysosomal membrane damage will result in the release of all these enzymes, which will ingest all the cellular components. And what will happen within the nucleus? There is protein misfolding and DNA damage, and there is activation of pro-apoptotic proteins. So this is what happens on the molecular level. We'll just go through each of them on a superficial scale so that you are aware what is happening. First one, I said there is functional and morphologic problem because of the reduced ATP in cell injury. So let's take this example, talk about heart. Ischemia, most common insult. There is ischemia to any organ. So then what happens? Each cell in that organ is going to first affect the mitochondria. Because of this, there's going to be reduced oxidative phosphorylation. Because of that, there is going to be reduced ATP production. Because of the reduced ATP production, the sodium pump is reduced. That will start an influx of calcium, water, and sodium into the cell, right? The sodium pumps get activated, which will result in, that is how cellular swelling has happened. You can relate now. The reduced oxidative phosphorylation has led to an activation of the sodium pump, which will cause an influx of calcium, water, and sodium. Now, when the cell tries to keep its homeostasis, because now calcium, sodium, all of them have come in, some other anion will have to go out. So what will go out? Potassium will go out. Yeah, following me? Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, once the potassium has gone out, your basic ionic stability has gone for a toss. Because of that, there's a triggering of endoplasmic reticulum and there is formation of these blebs. Yeah. This is one part which is happening. Second thing, because of reduced ATP, what happens? Your oxidative phosphorylation has reduced, so your aerobic glycolysis goes down. In order to protect its energy, what will the cell do? It will switch to anaerobic glycolysis. Once you go to anaerobic glycolysis, there is reduction of glycogen. Importantly, there is increase in lactic acid. Now, once lactic acid increases, it is acid. So what will happen? The pH will go more towards acidotic, right? Once that happens, this is called as lactic, And this particular change in pH and all will result in clumping of nuclear chromatin. Cell injury is now progressing. And here, if you can see, if we do the clinical markers, I will relate a clinical case to you. What will happen? Because of all these changes, efflux of potassium, all that, your ECG changes will start to appear. And the patient has gone into anaerobic glycolysis. If you do an ABG, you will see lactic acidosis. Your pH is reduced, lactic acid is increased. That means the cell is going for irreversible. It's going for nuclear clumping. Okay. Simultaneously, what else happens is there is going to be denaturation of the ribosomes. Because of that, there's going to be reduced protein synthesis, and whatever protein is there is going to be denatured. Okay, so that's one pathway. Then along with this, what else is going to happen in apoptosis? Okay, this is mainly in necrosis. If I have to tell you what is the difference between the oxidative phosphorylation, which is reduced between necrosis and apoptosis. Necrosis, I already explained. A reduced oxygen supply, you have mitochondrial injury, you have reduced ATP generation, multiple cellular abnormalities, along with increased production of reactive oxygen species. It has led to necrosis. Whereas in apoptosis, because of many insights such as reduced survival signals in the DNA, and now that cell is destined to die, what's going to happen is there's going to be an increase in something called as pro-apoptotic proteins and reduction in something called as the anti-apoptotic. Because of that, there is leakage of the mitochondrial proteins resulting in apoptosis. Okay, so there is no reactive oxygen species here, there is no lactic acidosis here. So that's why it's a programmed and a regulated cell death. Yeah. Next, what happens when there is influx of calcium and loss of calcium homeostasis? Now, because of our reduced oxidative phosphorylation, the channels are triggered in such a way that the extracellular calcium moves into the cell. Once the extracellular calcium moves into the cell, it will attack mitochondria, and then it has come out from the mitochondria and from the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So there is going to be an increase in the cytoplasmic calcium. Now, once that comes in, it will start. Calcium, we know, is needed as a coenzyme for multiple reactions, right? So that will result in activation of multiple cellular enzymes, which will cause phospholipases, proteases, endonucleases, and ATPases. All these cellular enzymes are activated, and ultimately they are going to cause membrane damage. These two, that is phospholipases and proteases, will result in disruption of the membrane and the cytoplasmic proteins, and thus membrane damage will occur. And then endonucleases will make sure that the nucleus is damaged. ATPases will still make sure that the ATP reduction continues so that the cell injury goes on. Okay, so this is what happens. Along with this, the mitochondrial permeability increases because the calcium is going to come out. So again, that will cause a reduction in ATP. So this is like a vicious cycle till the injurious agent gets removed. Otherwise, what is oxidative stress? That is release of so many reactive oxygen species. Presentation, which are your reactive oxygen species? The superoxide dismutase and hydrogen peroxide radical, hydroxyl radical, all these free radicals, right? So they have this ionic concentration cell membrane. Take, for example, any of the injurious stimuli, radiation, anything. So that is going to result in the production of all these free radicals free radicals that will convert the what I should say, it will result in decomposition of water by glutathione peroxidase and catalase, and basic whatever ions have been generated will be removed. Okay, phase of it. But then if this still continues, the injury still continues, that will result in lipid peroxidation, that will again cause your membrane damage. The proteinases are going to be activated, which will cause breakdown of these proteins and misfolding of these proteins, which will ultimately make sure that the cell dies, and into the nucleus there's going to be DNA damage and there's going to be mutations. Okay, that is what is oxidative stress. If you remember this, you will be able to appreciate the mutations, how the oxidative stress will result in the causation of cancer. Now, that molecular pathway can be related back to this diagram when we study neoplasia. Yeah, now we will come to the effect, how it is, how each of those final effects are happening. This is defect in membrane permeability. We already spoke about it. Reduction in ATP, mitochondria has acted. So all these lipases and endonucleases, everything has been activated. So there is a membrane damage. Also, calcium influx has happened. That has also caused a increase in membrane permeability. Along with, just before we said, if at all there is some free ion reactive oxygen species are increased, that will also result in membrane damage. So ultimately, membrane damage happens because of 2 or 3 different biochemical molecular pathways. And in the nucleus, the DNA and the proteins are damaged. There is misfolding of the DNA or mutation within the DNA. And once that happens, the body will identify something has gone wrong with this cell. It has to be removed. Either it goes towards necrosis, or if it goes towards apoptosis, there is activation of the pro-apoptotic proteins, and they will make sure that this particular cell is removed from the body. Yes, that was what I had planned for today's class. We will go through with some of these MCQs where we apply the knowledge, whatever we have learned right now. I want you all to participate. An 11-year-old girl becomes infected with hepatitis A and she experiences mild nausea for 1 week. On physical examination, she has minimal right upper quadrant tenderness and scleral icterus. Right? So basically, they're talking about a girl infected with hepatitis A. You know, hepatitis A is not a chronic disease. So we're talking about something which is acute, right? Lab findings include a serum AST of 68 and an ALT of 75 and a total bilirubin of 5.1. Her laboratory findings most likely result from which of the following changes in her hepatocytes? Now, to answer this question, you should know what are the normal levels of AST, ALT and total bilirubin. Now, you tell me whether AST, ALT and bilirubin are increased, normal or decreased.
Increased, ma'am.
All are increased? Sure? If you know that, you will answer this question. See, the question is, her lab findings most likely result from which of the following changes in her hepatocytes? Is it cell membrane defect? Is it lysosomal autophagy? Is it mitochondrial swelling? Is it nuclear clumping? Or is it ribosomal dispersion? So what are we talking about here? Is it a reversible injury or an irreversible injury?
Reversible.
Reversible. Any other answers? Reversible, why? If it is reversible, why? If it is irreversible, why? What is the clue that you find in this question which says whether this injury is reversible or irreversible?
Ma'am, it's an acute condition, that's why reversible.
Ha ha ha. The disease may be reversible. You're right. The disease is reversible. Had it been hepatitis B or hepatitis C, I would have said it's a chronic disease. That is different. In this acute hepatitis, with the lab findings which you have got, think about the cell. Whether that cell injury is reversible or irreversible. Have the liver enzymes increased? Has the bilirubin increased? See, basically AST, ALT, bilirubin all are increased. Okay, AST you can take up to 44 to 48 as normal. ALT also 44 to 48, 50 as normal. So both these enzymes have increased. Increased means you have detected that in the peripheral blood, right? So what would have happened? The cell has undergone irreversible injury resulting in cytoplasmic disruption, correct? Once there is a cytoplasmic disruption, these enzymes have moved out of the cell, okay, into the periphery, and that's how you have picked it up in the blood. I explained the same context, same thing with your myocardial infarction. Correct? I said you can detect troponin T, troponin I much before the changes on light microscopy were to appear, right? We detect within 1 to 2 hours of onset of myocardial ischemia. Similarly, this is liver. In this, they are saying that the liver enzymes are increased. That means they are asking you whether it is reversible or irreversible, and the clue they have given you is an increase in the enzymes here. So increase in enzymes means it has crossed the cellular disruption stage. So everything has come out. So it is irreversible. Now, which is the change among these options which will foolproof tell you that it is an irreversible cell injury? So what is the answer basically?
Ma'am, D.
Nuclear chromatin clumping. Okay. But that can be initially seen in reversible cell injury also. See, mitochondrial swelling can be seen initially in the reversible cell injury. Lysosomal dispersion can be seen. Lysosomal autophagy is not even related to this particular question in context. It is the cell membrane defect. Your cell membrane has become much more permeable, and that's why AST and ALT is elevated. This hepatocyte cells are broken. The cell borders or whatever, the cell membrane has become much more permeable and let out the enzymes, and that's why you have detected this. That with this you have concluded it is an irreversible cell injury. And what we are talking about as a hallmark of irreversible cell injury is the cell membrane defect. Yeah, that is the most appropriate answer for this particular question. Okay, clear? Shall I move on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, a 33-year-old woman has had increasing lethargy and decreased urine output for one past week. Lab studies show her serum creatinine is 4.3 and her blood urea nitrogen is 40. A renal biopsy is performed. See, basically, I'll only tell you that your creat and your one are increased. Okay. Her renal biopsy is performed and the specimen is examined using electron microscopy. Which of the following morphologic cellular changes most likely suggests a diagnosis of acute tubular necrosis? They've made your life simple. They have given you the diagnosis of acute tubular necrosis, and since it has necrosis within it, you are obviously looking at irreversible cell injury. Now, what you have to do is, you will have to pick out the electron microscopic feature which relates as a hallmark to necrosis. You can do that. Chromatin clumping, mitochondrial swelling, nuclear fragmentation, ribosomal disaggregation.
Nuclear fragmentation. Nuclear fragmentation. This third option.
All of you say the same. Correct. Good. So now you have understood, right? With necrosis, finally, there is going to be nuclear fragmentation. All others are not even, you cannot say that it happens only in irreversible cell injury. See this picture. A 50-year-old man has experienced an episode of chest pain for 6 hours. A representative histologic section of his left ventricular myocardium is shown in the figure. There is no hemorrhage or inflammation. Which of the following conditions most likely produce these myocardial changes? Okay, understood the question? They have given you a light microscopic picture of a section of the heart muscle. You will have to say what this represents. These are your options: arterial thrombosis, autoimmunity, blunt chest trauma, protein deficient diet, viral infection. First, you have to identify what kind of necrosis this is. Heart. We are talking heart. What is the most common type of necrosis in the heart? What is the hallmark for myocardial ischemia? What is the necrosis which is the hallmark? Coagulative necrosis. Very good. Now, what is the most common cause of coagulative ischemia? What is the commonest cause of ischemia to the heart?
Thrombosis.
Thrombosis. Do you think anything else will fit? So basically, even if you don't know and you have never seen under a microscope, with this scenario, if you know your molecular pathway, biochemical, and you know prototype of which necrosis for what, you will still answer this question correct, right? When you break it down to the way you have understood, this is how you can answer it, right? You answered correctly. It is arterial thrombosis, right? See, this is coagulative necrosis of the heart muscle. See here, all this is a telltale sign that a muscle was there. You cannot see any nucleus here. Okay, you can see this, just this pale eosinophilic kind of a glassy homogeneous substance without any nucleus. Okay, clear? Do I have to give you question? What is this? Who will tell me? Spotter. Necrosis. Very good. Example, prototype example.
Pancreatitis.
Acute pancreatitis. Very good. So we'll not spend much time on this question. A 38-year-old woman experienced severe abdominal pain over the past day. On examination, she is hypotensive and in shock. Lab studies show elevated serum lipase. Every clue is given here, basically. From the representative gross appearance of the mesentery shown in the figure, which of the following events most likely occurred? Is it acute pancreatitis? Is it gangrenous cholecystitis, hepatitis B infection, small intestinal infection, or tuberculous lymphadenitis? A closed DD is tubercular, but for you, this is a hallmark of acute pancreatitis, fat necrosis. This is your chalky white fat saponification. Next question. A 68-year-old woman suddenly lost consciousness, and on awakening 1 hour later, she could not speak or move her right arm. So basically, what happened to this patient clinically? She had
cerebral stroke.
She had a stroke. Very good. 2 months later, a head CT showed a large cystic area in the left parietal lobe. Which of the following pathologic processes has most likely occurred in her brain? Was it apoptosis, coagulative necrosis, fat necrosis, karyolysis, liquefactive?
Liquefactive.
Liquefactive.
Liquefactive, correct. So brain ischemia is the commonest prototype for your liquefactive necrosis. Very good. Yeah, seeing the picture, you'll tell me, or we'll go through the question. See, the question says, see, they want, I haven't given you any direct questions, okay? Your direct MCQs you will anyway do. When once you study the theory and once you understand the theory, your direct MCQs you will anyway pick up. Now, the difference in a well-studied person and the person who's understood the concept against somebody who just knows on superficial surface is the ones who are going to decipher such questions. When you give a clinical scenario, you twist the question and try to ask something which is very simple, right? That's why I take such MCQs and I try to discuss with you. This one, a screening chest X-ray of a 3 centimeter nodule in the middle lobe of his right lung. The nodule is excised with a pulmonary wedge resection, and sectioning shows a sharply circumscribed mass with a soft white center. The microscopic appearance is shown in the figure. The serum interferon gamma release assay is positive. So that's another additional clue that we are talking about. Which disease?
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis. Very good. Right? And what is the question? Which of the following pathologic processes has most likely occurred in this nodule? They're asking whether it's apoptosis, caseous necrosis, coagulative necrosis, fat necrosis, or a fatty change, or gangrenous necrosis, or liquefactive. So since we have identified its tuberculosis, the prototype is caseous necrosis. Yeah, clear? Just let's touch upon something a little more difficult. An experimental drug administered to a tissue preparation is found to inhibit cellular oxidative phosphorylation when given in high doses, and ATP production drops to 5% of the normal. Right? What are they saying? They're trying to say that we are giving an injurious stimulus. This is an experimental drug which causes an injury. Now, next, what else they are telling us? Cell membrane function is diminished. Cell membrane function is diminished. That means we are going towards irreversible cell injury. Which of the following substances is most likely to be present at increased concentration in culture fluid bathing the tissue? Now, did you understand the question?
Yes, calcium.
Which of the following substances is most likely to be present at increased concentration? Where? Have they asked you inside the cell or have they asked you outside the cell? They have asked you.
It is irreversible cell injury. It might have gone. But it's outside, but it will go inside one because cell membrane function is
Correct.
diminished.
But what have they asked you?
They are bathing it, which is external.
They are bathing the tissue in some fluid. Inside the tissue is your cell.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. It's irreversible cell injury.
Yes,
so calcium has gone into your cell and thus into your tissue. Once calcium has gone into the cell, what comes out to maintain your electric balance? One anion went in, calcium went in. What comes out? I explained.
Potassium comes out.
Yeah.
Potassium, right? See, you understood it correctly, very beautifully. Irreversible cell injury, influx of calcium happens, correct. But the question is twisted such that they're asking you what came out. Understood? So they are asking you what is present at increased concentration in culture fluid bathing the tissue, right? So that is the twist here, and therefore the answer is potassium. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. A 47-year-old woman has poorly controlled diabetes mellitus and she develops coronary artery disease. She now has a decreasing cardiac output with a blood pressure of 80/40. That means she is hypotensive and her ejection fraction is very less, 18%. An increase in which of the following substances in her blood is most indicative of reversible cell injury from decreased systemic arterial perfusion of multiple organs and tissues?
Ma'am, first option. Sorry, E, troponin 1. Troponin 1.
They're talking about reversible cell injury. Troponin I happens when there is irreversible cell injury, when the cell membrane leaks out and the enzymes from the cell goes out, and thus you measure it in the blood. So troponin I it's correct, but if it was an irreversible cell injury, correct? Now they are asking you which is most indicative of reversible cell injury. Why this reversible cell injury has happened? It is because of reduced systemic arterial perfusion. Because of your hypotension, there is hypoxemia, right? Because of hypoxemia, that means reduced ATP, reduced oxidative phosphorylation. Because of reduced oxidative phosphorylation, what happened? Some acid was released.
Oh, lactic acid, ma'am. Anaerobic respiration.
Correct. Anaerobic glycolysis releasing lactic acid, and that will later go on to irreversible if not controlled. But since this question is framed such that they are looking at something which will explain a reversible cell injury, the answer has to be lactic acid, right? If they hadn't mentioned anything about reversible cell injury and they would ask you what among these is going to represent that the heart muscle is in distress, or if they say what will tell about an irreversible cell injury, or what will talk about myocardial ischemia in such a case, then you will say tropi. Okay. All others are not to be considered also. Carbon dioxide, creatinine, and glucose, they don't even come into the picture. You'll have a difficulty between these two. Since the question is talking about reversible cell injury, it is lactic acid. Yeah, I hope I'm clear. Yeah, that's all for today. Next class, we will do apoptosis. Yeah, any question, any doubt? Any doubt?
Ma'am, I have a doubt, ma'am.
Tell me.
Ma'am, the previous question, what you explained, like due to decreased perfusion, due to decreased ejection fraction, so the heart is vulnerable, like it's undergoing the damage, reversible.
Right. Correct. No, it's actually irreversible. See, let me show you that again. It's actually an irreversible cell injury only. But they have asked you not to the heart. They have asked you.
Oh, to the, okay, supplying on.
They have asked you to the rest of the organs. If you see the question correctly. See, you can see the screen, right?
Yes,
So they have given you all the details which talks about irreversible cell injury. But then the question says, an increase in which of the following substances in her blood is most indicative of reversible cell injury from decreased systemic arterial perfusion of multiple organs and tissues? Right? Because her ejection fraction is so less, there is hypotension, shock, hypoxemia. In all other organs and tissues, there is going to be hypoxemia. So they're asking you here, what is the most relevant thing for reversible cell injury? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. If the cardiac is undergoing damage and if the both multiple organs are undergoing damage, shouldn't the troponin and lactic acid increase? I mean, like, I guess heart is like more important also. Like, I don't know.
Right. I understand. But then the question here is talking clearly about reversible cell injury. Tropi is not reversible cell injury. Tropi will be released only once the cell becomes irreversibly damaged, with your cell membrane becoming permeable and releasing these enzymes into the circulation. Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, got it. Thank you.
Any other question? If no other question, shall we close the meeting? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. You can log off.
Thank you.